have any questions for me?
Yes, Miss Ray, we kind of struggling with action A.
Okay, yeah, that one is Washington's farewell addresses. Yeah, this one is kind of tricky. What did you guys come up with so far after reading it?
I think it's team player.
Okay, team player. What's another term? What's the term though for team player?
Collective security.
Right, collective security. Now, why do you think it's more collective security?
Because he argued that trade with the other nations would benefit Americans, but that entangling alliances would draw the United States into undesirable conflict.
Okay, we put it between internationalism and imperialism. We put internationalism because they're kind of involved with other countries, but at the same time, they're not bullying them, but they do want to have their security at the same time.
Hey, Linda. I was walking in the halls and saw that you were doing a lesson on U.S. foreign policy, and it really seemed like your students were engaged in a pretty vigorous debate.
Well, yeah, that excitement just seemed to carry over from the writing prompt. It seemed to be a good hook for students in the beginning of the discussion.
Well, what was the hook? I can always use a good example to steal.
Well, I wanted to start the lesson with something that students could connect to, that related to their everyday lives. So I looked through the curriculum guide, and I found this activity referenced in the section for the unit. So following the benchmarks in the curriculum guide, I was planning a unit on U.S. imperialism. The topic, it normally bores them and they are so disengaged. So I know I needed a strong hook to get them engaged. I asked students what they would do if a fight broke out in school. I drew this scenario from History Alive.
It seemed to work pretty well. And I also noticed that you had students up and moving around.
Well, yeah, I like to have my lessons be very active, and I like to engage all different modes of learning. Using History Alive, I can tap students' multiple intelligence. By physically moving to the continuum, they might remember it more vividly. Especially for my more kinesthetic students. And the work with their partner engages them interpersonally. Even reflecting on a scenario and their reactions to it gets at their intrapersonal intelligence.
Yeah, that's pretty important. I think sometimes I tend to rely on one kind of intelligence, and you seem to do a good job of working with all the different students. But how do you go from there to actually starting the lesson?
Well, at this point in the year, my students know a routine I've established in the classroom. They know to look at the prompt, the scenario in this case that I posted, open up their journals, and start responding. So I don't waste any time as I take attendance and do other, housekeeping.
Yeah, I had some trouble establishing routines at the beginning of the year. Now I seem to be more confident at it, and the routines are down with my students. I even have a routine for having students work with partners. Every couple of weeks, I put a new partner list, and students rotate. That way they know they don't have to work with anyone for too long, but I get everyone to work with everyone else instead of just staying with a clique of students. So that seems to work out pretty well.
Well, sounds like you've got good routines in place. If you have those routines for students working together, you're probably comfortable with doing this lesson.
Yeah, I think I could probably do the lesson, but I'm not really sure how you move the kids from discussing that scenario you talked about, the hook, to actually doing foreign policy on the spectrum. How do you get there?
Well, that is a tricky transition. You have to slip in all of the vocabulary, connect the terms to their own experience, and use it naturally and repeatedly throughout the lesson. Then, when you do your formal assessment, you want to make sure that they use the terminology appropriately. I'm doing this lesson again tomorrow. You're welcome to come by.
Yeah, that'd be good. I'd like to see how you get that transition in. Hey.
Oh, hey. Yeah, how you doing?
Pretty good. I know we talked the other day about maybe me coming in and observing a little bit, and is this period still fine for you?
Oh, yeah, not a problem. Just come on in and have a seat. Right now, I'm just working on setting up the lesson. I'm going to introduce it to the students in a way that puts it in a real-life scenario situation so that they can better understand it a little bit.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Good morning, class. Today, we're going to start a lesson on foreign policy. But before we get started, I want to present to you a scenario. It's probably a scenario that all of you have been involved in, at least here at Brookhaven. Now, say for example, you see a group of students together in a hallway, they're pushing each other, and then all of a sudden somebody yells, "Fight!" Fight! That's right. And of course, you all run over there to see what's happening. When you get over there, you notice that there are two students about to fight, okay? Two of them. They got their stance. You notice that one of them is a current friend of yours, and the other is a former friend of yours who owes you some money, okay? So you're standing there, they're about to fight. One is a friend, and then the other is somebody that owes you some money. Now I want to know, what would you do? Okay, hold on. I want you to write it down first because you have to pick from these 4 different scenarios. Right. And tell me why, okay? So the first one, turn away and leave because the fight does not concern you and getting involved will only mean trouble. 2, convince a couple of friends to help you separate the 2 students before they hurt each other. 3, get into the fight on your friend's side and punch out the former friend who owes you money since he deserves it. And 4, punch out both students to show the rest of the school who the toughest kid on campus is. Yeah, well, campus means school, okay? So what would you do and why? Well, no. I'll just write it down first, and then we'll share them, okay? I'm now going to have a discussion that connects these 4 ideas to the terminology on the spectrum. Okay. Now I'm going to ask 4 of you volunteers to share their response, but I ask that you raise your hand before you share your response. Would anybody would like to share? What would they do if they saw this fight about to happen? Sarai?
I would turn away and leave because the fight does not concern me and getting involved will only mean more trouble.
Okay. Will somebody do something a little bit different? Brian?
I say I would watch because I don't have anything to do with it. Whether he win or lose, he's still gonna owe me my money.
Okay. That's a different way of looking at it. What about somebody over here? Shayla?
I said I would pick number 2. I would convince a couple of friends to come with me and help me separate the fight.
Okay. How about another one? What about somebody, any other volunteers? Tanoya?
Okay, Ms. Wright, I kind of went along with Sarai. I chose number 1 because I said, there's nothing I could do because it doesn't concern me. Their negative actions could cause severe consequences that I don't want anything a part of. And if I try to convince them not to fight, there's no guarantee that they won't.
Okay, now I'm seeing a lot of you would either so far or tend to leaning towards 1 and 2. What about any 3s and 4s? Now, you can be honest. Okay, Roosevelt.
I picked number 3 because I still owe the former friend that owed me money.
Oh, okay, so you kind of feel like you want to help your friend and then the former friend owes you money.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know a lot of you are wondering, Miss Ray, why are we sitting here talking about a fight, whether or not we would jump in it, or would we just sit back and watch, or would we go get help, or would we try to break it up? Well, believe it or not, these ideas are going to help you understand U.S. foreign policy during the 19th and 20th centuries. There's some terminology that goes along with these different scenarios, and that's what we're going to learn about today, from isolationism to imperialism. Exactly where would you place certain U.S. events on a spectrum? Now, the first, number 1, turn away and leave because the fight does not concern you and getting involved will only mean trouble. The term that is associated with that relates to U.S. foreign policy is isolationism. And what this means, of course, is strict non-involvement in the affairs of other nations. Don't get involved, okay? Just as with the fight, you're not going to get involved. The second one, convince a couple of friends to help you separate the 2 students before they hurt each other, has to do with the term collective security. And what this is working with other countries to influence world affairs. The next one, get into the fight on your friend's side and punch out the former friend who owes you money since he deserves it. That term is internationalism. And the last one is imperialism. Punch out both students to show the rest of the school who the toughest kid on campus. This imperialism, that's right. Nobody wanted to be imperialist in here. But that's extending power by acquiring territory around the globe or exploiting weaker nations to serve national interests. Okay, class, so now we're getting ready to start an activity that's going to allow for you to work with a partner and place world events with U.S. policy on a spectrum. Now, a spectrum, you might have seen one of these before, and you can use it in a various different ways with different terminology. But how we're using it, it's just kind of like a line, a continuum, and you have what is considered different extremes, okay? Now, at one end, we'll have, right, isolationism. And we know that that means what? Not getting involved. So if we had to go all the way to the other end, almost the completely opposite, what term would we use? Imperialism. Imperialism. Okay, so we have two left, collective security. Where would that go? Where? Right. So we have this. This is collective security. And then next, internationalism. Okay. So what you're going to do, this is going to allow you to kind of see, well, where on the spectrum might you place a certain event? Okay, would it be down here with isolationism, not getting involved at all, or all the way to the other extreme and being almost like a bully? So now we're getting ready to start the assignment. I'm going to need for you to get into pairs. Okay, so now that you have gotten into partners, I'm going to pass out part of the activity so we can get started. Just take one, pass it back, and place your name at the top. At the top, you should have your spectrum with the 4 terms. Isolationism, collective security, internationalism, and imperialism should be across the top. And it also gives the definitions that I read to you earlier. Because what we're going to look at is some U.S. events, and you're going to place that event on a particular part of the spectrum. Okay? So I'm going to pass that out to you, and we're going to do one together. And then for the remaining time, you and your partner are going to work on this and try to discuss where would you put certain events on the spectrum. You'll put in those different boxes the answers and the events. So each group will get one. So you and your partner will need to work on this and read it together. So I'm going to pass it back, and each group just keep one. Okay, do you guys have any questions for me?
Yes, Miss Ray, we kind of struggling with action A.
Okay, yeah, that one is Washington's farewell addresses. Yeah, this one is kind of tricky. What did you guys come up with so far after reading it?
I think it's team player.
Okay, team player. What's another term? What's the term, though, for team player?
Collective security.
Right, collective security. Now, why do you think it's more collective security?
Because he argued that trade with other nations would benefit Americans, but that entangling alliances would draw the United States into undesirable conflict.
Okay, yeah, so that does sound like a little bit like collective security because of what?
Because of trade.
Because of trade. Now, but what about this term right here, entangling alliances? What does that mean?
Well, I think it's mean like not getting involved, so it'd be like isolationism.
Right, so he's kind of looking at both of those things. So where might you put him now that you've looked at both of those, trade and entangling alliances?
In between.
In between, right. So they might be in between there. That was a very good job. So you really have to look at these and really dissect what is it they're saying, because they're not always going to be solely, you know, isolationist or imperialism. You're going to fall somewhere in between on the spectrum. Okay, class, you're doing a good job of working with your partner, but now we're going to discuss these as a whole class. So I need everybody's attention. Okay, thank you. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to place these different actions on the spectrum. So let's start with the first one. Can I have a volunteer to come up and place action A, Washington's farewell address, on the spectrum? Where would you put it? Okay, Jaleesa. Just place it at the top. Okay. So where exactly is that? Well, I'll wait till you get your seat. Okay, so where are you placing that?
In between isolationism and collective security.
Why?
Why? Because they both, well, entangled analysis is like non-involvement.
Right.
And collective security has something to do like trade.
Okay, so you're saying that in between because of trade and non-involvement. So can you have trade with non-involvement?
Yes.
You can? So you can trade without being involved?
Oh,
with other
no,
countries?
no.
No. Okay. Let's move on to action B. Could I have a volunteer come up and place action B on the spectrum? Okay, so Rai. Okay. Okay, so Rai, can you explain where you put it and why?
Okay, we put it between internationalism and imperialism. We put internationalism because they're kind of involved with other countries, but at the same time, they're not bullying them. But they do want to have their security at the same time. So they're not going to bully people, but they're going to be involved to get, their trades or whatever, but they're not going to be bullying people at the same time. So they're going to get it fair.
Okay, what other people are you talking about? What is this Monroe Doctrine talking about?
Latin America and Europe.
Okay.
And they were interfering with the Western Hemisphere.
Who's they?
The Latin America.
Okay, who?
European.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
the Europeans were trying to get hold of Latin America.
And so in the United States felt what? About the Europeans interfering? What the United States felt about Europeans interfering?
They felt they should get involved and make sure to have security.
Who?
Latin America.
Okay, all right. So you kind of put it in between internationalism and imperialism. Now, does anybody agree or disagree with that? Jaleesa?
I put a least toward isolationism because they get involved.
Okay, now explain that again. What do you mean?
Like they getting involved because you saying, well, Sarai was saying that they want national security and they not trying to bully them, but they both getting involved. Well, Latin America is getting involved, so.
Well, what does isolationism mean?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. That's all right. Not getting involved. So then, now that you know that, where might you say?
I'll leave right there. I agree.
Yeah. Why?
They not really trying to bully them, but they want some security also.
Okay. So would you put it in the middle, or do you put it more here?
I put more in internationalism.
More internationalism? Okay.
Wow, I think that went really well. What I liked about it, something I don't get usually, is that the students arguing with each other about the material we're talking about. Where should the Monroe Doctrine go on this spectrum? So I thought that went really well. Question is, where do you go from here? How do you assess this so you can have something that you're going to grade? What do you use for assessment?
Yeah, I'm going to have them write in their notebook an extended response. They're going to pick an event that they didn't discuss today, something different in world events, and they're going to place it on a spectrum. And I'm going to make sure that they use the correct terminology in assessing that. That way I'll know they met the grade level indicator. So basically just writing about something that hasn't happened. Something we didn't discuss, and I'm going to have them put that in their notebook.
Do you have an event in mind or something?
Maybe what's going on right now with Iraq. I think that'll be good for the kids to look at and say, well, where is U.S. falling right now with their decisions to go over into Iraq?
I thought the lesson went really well. What sort of extended responses did you receive?
Well, thanks. I was pleased with the outcome of the lesson. They seemed to have an understanding of the benchmark. They showed an ability to use terminology accurately, but some students will need to improve in articulating their reasoning. I'll use my next lesson on imperialism to target that skill.
Well, there wasn't 100% success, but students were engaged in talking about foreign policy. And more than that, they were evaluating it.
Well, it helps that we have access to this great resource as Columbus teachers. The History Live provides high motivational content to use.
It does demonstrate that with the right effort and the right approach, you can have high expectations for all students. And you don't have to water down the curriculum. We saw our students debating foreign policy with real sophistication.
Go ahead, Mario.
I think it could be collective security too, because they helping them out, like America helping out Latin America.
Okay, so you think it's more help, not necessarily trying to bully. Okay, so Rye, let's go back over here. What do you?
Okay, now that I hear like everybody else's opinions, I think there is collective security and internationalism, because they're not really being a bully. Like imperialism says, extending power by acquiring territory, but they're not trying to take anybody's territory. And then it also says exploiting. They're not exploiting anybody. They already know that they're weak, so they're not being exploited. So United States and Latin America just working together to keep them, you know, a good country or whatever. So I think it's collective security and internationalism.
Thank you.